Welcome to the Catholic Economics Podcast. I'm your host, Levi Russell, and today is September 7th, 2020. Today, I'm super excited to have Alexander Brown on the show. Alexander is a seminarian at St. Charles Borromeo Seminary, and he is also a research associate at the Leonine Institute for Catholic Social Teaching, an organization at which I am a fellow. So Alexander wrote an article in the Institute's magazine, the inaugural issue of the magazine that just came out last week. And so I'll put a link to that. Please check that out. There's lots of great stuff in there. And if you'd like to support the Institute in one way or another, feel free to check out the support page there. And I'm sure the Institute would appreciate that greatly. So, Alex, I just want to talk to you about your article because it's about the history of the idea of subsidiarity, and not the history of the idea in the sense that we're trying to figure out what people thought about subsidiarity. Really, it's more about how was it applied in the past in the West. And so I guess to start off, like what motivated you to write specifically about history? I know the magazine had a theme for the issue, but what motivated you to talk about the history of subsidiarity?
Well, that's a very interesting question because history just always fascinates me as a broad subject. But what interests me about the history of subsidiarity is that when you look backwards in history, you see small cultures, you see small communities. So it's easy to kind of romanticize the past and say, well, we want to go back to the past. But you have this inclination that people really had an awareness of, what they were doing. So I wanted to find where people intentionally sought to preserve subsidiarity and where they wanted to keep their business and their family and their community small and to work at the lowest possible level. So it really was a hunt for me to find where subsidiarity existed, in the past.
Got it. So how would you summarize the idea of subsidiarity in Western history in the sense that how important is it? Like, I mean, was subsidiarity something that was just like a conscious policy decision like we would today? Like we're going to have, the tariff rate in China is going to be this amount or whatever. Or was it just more kind of an attitude and something that came naturally from the religion? Or where do you think that source was?
I think it's both and, like most things Catholicism. So originally, it was an organic development. Like I said, communities were small. You knew all your neighbors. You relied on all your neighbors. There are a couple of stereotypes about the past that I really reject and kind of get angry when I hear. Like, for instance, this idea we have of the Middle Ages being the Monty Python-esque. People were stupid, dirty, like whatever. That's false.
Like muck farmers, right?
Right.
Just
so that's ridiculous. But something that isn't ridiculous about the Middle Ages, about really the past as a whole, is that they were very dangerous. I'm working through Mahomet's Arthurian legends right now, which is a little bit of a tangent. But in it, he talks about there's robbers roaming the countryside, and that's just a reality of the past. So subsidiarity was a necessity. You needed to trust the people around you because you didn't know what was in the outside world. So it was an organic development like that. But what we find when I wrote in the article, I wrote about the statute of artificers, or the statute of artisans, as it's also called. That was an intentional decision to preserve subsidiarity in England because things were really falling apart at the time of writing. We had the English Reformation, you had the Civil War was kind of starting. People were getting at each other's throats. So what Elizabeth and Parliament tried doing was basically return to tradition, as much as the cliche sounds. They were trying to go back to what was working and save England by going to what was natural. So it is both and. It's an organic development because it was just a necessity of the ancient, the modern, postmodern world being dangerous. It's something you always find. But you do find milestones where there's an intentionality to preserve subsidiarity. Does that make sense? Does that answer the question?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So one of the main themes you had in this piece was you talked about the idea of apprenticeship and how and it really was interesting, I think, because you really did a good job describing kind of how apprenticeship was kind of woven into the fabric of society. It wasn't just this kind of job training program. I mean, of course, college today or whatever, or some kind of job training program. It is part of our society in the sense that when you reach a certain age, you're just sort of expected to leave your house and go find this. Training or whatever, and often, I mean, obviously, I've personally said a lot of bad things about the idea of moving away from your family to go to college and live with a bunch of people your own age, and how ridiculous you end up acting, partly because of that, I think.
Oh yeah.
But and not you specifically, obviously, but in general, right? I'm not talking about you, but so you in there you explain this idea that someone would be an apprentice and they would go off and live. So can you just kind of sketch that out real briefly, and maybe tell us why it is that or like what age a person would leave their house to go live with this master of the trade? And then because that was one of the things that as I was reading I was kind of wondering, it's like, okay, well, if it takes, at one point you mentioned it takes like 7 years for you to go from being an apprentice to a master or something like that. And how long? I mean, so do I start when I'm 12 or do I start when I'm 20? I mean, how does that? Can you sketch that out and let us know the age thing a little bit?
Sure. The age thing depends upon what trade you go into. Some were more labor intensive than others, so that really shapes part of it. But really, if you're not spoken for by time you're 12, at 12 years old, you were really supposed to be pulling your weight for the community. Actually, in this community that I'm a part of, like my hometown, they were agrarian based, and they had this ritual of giving the young woman when she was 12 years old a sewing needle, and the young men a pen by the time they're 12 years old, as just a symbol that they're supposed to be pulling their weight now. So, that's a really hard question to ask, but I'm going to say 12 years old, you should be spoken for as an apprentice.
Okay. And so the thing is when you say spoken for as an apprentice, so it's like, so if I'm a male child in my household, let's say I've got I don't know, 7 or 8 brothers and sisters. So how does my family just kind of says, well, bye bye, and then you're going to go off across town, or am I going to go across the countryside? Where am I going to go? And I mean, because to me it's today we talk about a lot about community, and we live in this modern world where we can jump on the highway, we can jump on the interstate, and we can be living in a completely different city, hundreds of especially in the U.S., right? Several hundreds of miles away from our home in a very little time. But so when some young guy, right, some 12-year-old guy would leave and go to be an apprentice somewhere, I mean, how far is he going? Is he going across town? Is he leaving? And you say contributing and all of this, and so obviously a lot of people would make their living on a farm, right? I mean, you would have a farm. That's how you produced for yourself, right, or for the Lord or whatever. But as far as these apprenticeships go, would all of the boys leave? Did the girls have something like that, or do they just hang around until they got married?
No, the girls did something like that too. Women were responsible for a lot of the textile trades, so like you needed to know things to make a good home. But as far as like where you go, so a lot of the guilds in 11th to the 15th century, they were city-based. The guild masters had a lot to do with their community. So when you talk about going away for apprentice, you're not going across the country. You're staying within your city's district. So even the apprenticeship program were kept small. Now this changed when we started doing explorations, when you started needing artisans overseas in the colonies. Of course, I'm thinking predominantly England, Ireland, Wales, and their explorations. But when you go across the seas and you need artisans, the apprentice would go with them. But mainly, you're talking about keeping it local. The apprentice would be, lack of a better word, given to a master through the negotiation of father to master. So it wasn't like the father was sending off his son to God knows where. the family did have some control over where the apprentice went, and usually that was within the city boundaries.
Got it. Okay. Well, I think that's just such an interesting uh, point, and I think it's valuable to talk about this historical stuff for its own sake. But I think also this is where we can get into this idea of kind of applying this in uh, our lives today. I mean, I obviously we can't, we don't have guilds and stuff today, but maybe we will at some point in the future.
From
But
your mouth to God's ears.
right, yeah. See, and I think that's I wanna ask you to kind of jump out on a limb here because I know at the end of your piece you say, how do we live it out today, right? So and we're talking about subsidiarity and specifically apprenticeships. How do we live it out today? And you say, the answer to that question I will leave to my betters. But I want to ask you to step out on a limb because my thing is, I value expertise in some ways. Obviously, I mean, I have a PhD, so I mean, I see the value in that to an extent to, going into even as broken as the academic system is today, and learning things at the highest possible level. But I guess my thing is like I don't have a great grasp on all of this history. I'm not a historian, and so to me, there's a ton of wisdom just in there seems to be a ton of wisdom just in absorbing what what has been what has been the case in the past. And so I mean, maybe you don't have necessarily the technical expertise today talking about cooperatives and business forms and all of
Sure,
that
yeah.
stuff, but what is your general feeling about how we can improve our current system? Because like you said, return to tradition, right? And it's sort of a joke. I mean, what are you going to do? Just blow everything up? But to me, there should be some way for us to use the principles that we have used in the past and reapply them today. So what do you think about that? What can we learn today from this apprenticeship program that's very focused on subsidiarity?
There are a couple ways you can go with that, and obviously, I won't bore you with every thought I've had there. But first, like you said, we can't just blow everything up. It's not about returning to a pre-industrial era. That's just not going to happen. And I think you mentioned that in your talk on the usury meaning of Catholic, right? Like, we can't return physically to where we were in 1563. But what the past does give us is a litmus test of what has worked and what has not. Right. So when we're talking about new policies, what we should have in the back of our minds are what did the guilds look like and how did they work and how did apprenticeship work and how did education work and what did teaching children like apprentice, what did that look like? So when you're looking at building new universities and you have huge campuses with huge, bureaucratic boards, you compare them in your head and you're like, well, this isn't right. We shouldn't do this. We shouldn't fund large corporations that have no respect to the workers, that have no intention to teach those working in the business the ins and outs of the business. So it's not about necessarily tearing down in my mind, but more of going forward in picking a direction of how we want to go forward. I think that's like the broadest way we can apply history to where we are now. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I guess my question would be, what is something you're aware of today in the way things work? And I know you're a seminarian, and so that is an academic pursuit that doesn't lend itself to an apprenticeship. I guess we haven't had an apprenticeship for priesthood for probably a long time if we ever did, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but what do you think about? You have friends who have presumably gone off to different things after high school and all of that. What do you think that we can do to improve the sort of training and education of maybe even just friends of yours that you know?
Uh, that I'm a little hesitant to articulate since I don't know like you said, the ins and outs of modern education. What's something we can do to improve? Mainly just stopping the stigma around working in a trade. I think a lot of my friends, when going off to, to college, to higher education, they wanted to do things like they wanted to go into construction, or they wanted to, to go into a trade that would be hands-on, but they were discouraged from doing so because, it doesn't make money, or this reason and that reason. So I think it's just on our level, I've experienced a discouragement of learning for learning's own sake, the trades.
Right. Well, so I guess that would be another. I mean, I guess this is part of the reality that life just seems to have been simpler back then. It's like the assumption in your head, as you're a kid, is that this is what I'm going to go do, right? I'm either going to hang out here and work on the farm, or I'm going to go and learn some kind of a trade as an apprentice, and I'm leaving at this age roughly or whatever. But the I guess today the assumption is completely different, right? The assumption is, and I mean, I said this last week in my my prediction of doom for my own field, which is higher education, that the assumption today is that if I mean, you're flat out told your whole life, if you don't go to college, you're going to be homeless, you're going to be in prison, blah 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 blah,
Right.
and of course that's obviously not the case, because something like, I think 38% of people in the U.S. have degrees. But I guess to me, when I was reading your piece, it kind of felt like, this is one of the things that's really important for us to get across, is that there isn't a need for us to really completely upend society. But one of the things we need to get right is that we have to stop telling our children that they have to go to college, and that college is the only way for you to get anywhere in life. And to me, what's really crucial about that is there's so many policy incentives that go into that. I mean, the high schools themselves, their prestige is decided on, how many and where their students go to college, after they graduate. And, as far as parents go, I feel like with the boomers, it was like, they saw this as just, that was the way we were going to continue to increase everyone's wealth, right? Was human capital, right? We're going to send everybody to college, and everybody's going to get smarter. But I think by the time Gen X rolled around, it was just sort of assumed, like, this is just how things are going to have to be. And so then, especially with my generation, because I'm quite a bit older than you, my generation and yours both, I mean, it was just baked in. So it seems like there's at least, it gives us a hope. This whole discussion of apprenticeship and stuff, it gives us hope that there is a way for us to turn this around and create a different set of sort of baseline assumptions to the way we do things. And so would you agree with that?
Oh, wholeheartedly. Yeah. We tell our kids that they have to go to these institutions. I tell our kids, I mean, look at me. You grow up hearing that you have to go to these institutions, but these institutions, they just kind of process you. They don't really tailor anything to your skill set, which is how the apprenticeship flourished, right? So like the master could actually work with the apprentice as a human being.
Right.
So
well, and I think that speaks to some of the criticisms that higher education has dealt with. I'm thinking of Brian Kaplan, who is a libertarian economist, but we won't hold that against him in this particular instance. He talks about, he has this, man, I can't remember the name of the book, but he has a book on the concept of the sheepskin effect, where the whole purpose of your education is actually just to get the degree. You know what I mean? Like, so and the evidence for this is something like, if you have, you would think that if education itself is what improved your life, okay, as an individual student, then you would think that, 1 year of college and then, 2 years of college, well, 2 years of college would increase your wage roughly double what 1 year would, or the point is, at least there would be some kind of linear gradient there, right? 1 year of education would give you sort of a predictable increase. But what the reality is that you get these 2 or 3 years and they have some increase in your salary. And then boom, all of a sudden, when you get the degree, right? So it's the sheepskin, right? You put this sheepskin on, and now the wolf looks like a sheep, right?
Right.
It's whether or not you get the degree, that's what determines whether or not you're actually going to get some kind of an increase in your lifetime earnings. And the other thing that he talks about is this idea of a sorting mechanism. So it's not so much what you learn in school. It's which school did you go to, and what your degree is in, and your GPA, right? So like all these employers that require degrees. I mean, for instance, like when I was in college, I worked for Enterprise Rent-A-Car, and I couldn't be at the basement level. I kind of had to be like a car wash guy who wore a tie, because like you had to have a degree to actually be a full-time employee. And it's like it didn't matter what your degree was. I mean, you could have a degree in English literature, and that degree would be good enough to get you in on the ground floor. And so again, it's evidence that it's not about the content. It's about it's about just whether or not you're there, and the sorting mechanism of the whole thing. So do you, as far as your study of apprenticeship, uh, do you see some way that the apprenticeships mimic this kind of thing? Like what I'm thinking is, I go and if I'm going to be an apprentice with, Jim down the street rather than Bob, and if Bob has maybe Bob has a higher, and a higher place in the guild, or something like that. Was there some kind of sorting that went on in this apprenticeship type of thing? Like were certain masters sort of vying for the local guys that they thought would be good in their trade, or how did that? Did you read anything about that?
Yes, that does exist. I mean, it always exists. You're better at what you do than you're sought out. You want, you're a father, you have your son, you say like, I want my son to go to Jim rather than Bob, because I want him to get higher in the community and just be sought after. But the thing about going back to subsidiarity and how it's natural, no matter how good you are, a master can only keep 5 apprentices at the most,
Oh, I
because
see.
they're living in his house,
Right. Yeah.
and there's only so much work to go around, and that's why there are so many. That's why there were so many like little shops in the past,
Hmm.
because this was all tied into like what you could actually manage.
Well, and I would imagine that the guild itself is trying to manage the supply, right? Like you don't want every master taking on 5 guys and just cranking out this massive explosion in the number of blacksmiths or whatever. I mean, I can imagine, like you said, there's only so many customers, over any short time period, right? And I can hear my fellow PhD economists, yammering about the lump of labor fallacy and all this nonsense. But for the purposes of this, the short-sighted kind of short-term kind of thing is there's only so many customers, so I can't just, prolifically multiply blacksmiths, right?
Exactly. Actually, I before entering seminary, I used to work for a company. We were blacksmiths. We used to do reconstruction work on period houses in the historic style. And my master, the man who taught me, he would always used to joke that when my time was up, he'd ask me to move as far away from him as I could.
Right.
Like that was,
Yeah.
he'd say that pretty regularly actually, and it hurt a little bit.
Yeah, right. Of course. Well, also, well, I guess here's another follow-up on that. So, was there this idea that some people didn't make it as masters, so like they just ended up kind of, I don't know, building a little house somewhere near the master, and they just worked there like as an employee, kind of?
They're called journeymen,
Okay, I see.
and apprentices would graduate in a sort of sense to journeymen when their 7 years was up, when they could no longer legally be an apprentice. But
Mm,
in order to be an apprentice, you have to create a masterpiece, a master's piece.
I see.
So, and that was like your thesis. So you'd go before the guild with your master's piece, and if you were good enough, that's when they grant you the rank of master.
Right. So it's sort of like the I mean this is similar to I think graduate degrees and stuff like this today, like you said, masterpiece, like your thesis, right? So then
Mhm.
thinking master's degrees or PhDs, where you have this, this work that's supposed to at least it's certainly not going to be your best thing ever you ever do, but it's supposed to kind of get you over a hurdle, I guess. Okay, so that
Just
makes sense. But so then if someone failed that, I guess it wasn't like, oh, back to being an apprentice. No, you became a journeyman and that was the deal, right?
that was the deal, right? And just a
Okay.
note on, you asked in the beginning of this how things were kept local. When you were a master, you were given something that's called freedom of the city.
Okay.
So that gave you essentially the right to vote.
Mm,
Um, that's in modern terms, but another incentive to keep things local. That's what you wanted. You worked for the good of your community.
right. Right.
So the position of master was a very coveted one. They didn't just let anyone in.
Right, and I think that maybe it's sort of like what separates these guilds from cooperatives, and I don't want to get into cooperatives, but
Sure.
cooperatives, the whole thing is you're pooling the equity of all of the whatever it is, farmers or whatever kind of co-op you have, and every person who is a member also has a vote, and so I think that there's a lot of discussion in co-ops of this sort of democracy kind of idea. But what you're saying is the guilds weren't really run that way. You had to actually achieve a certain level before you were able to have some kind of control rights over the organization of the guild itself.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So I think this has all been really interesting, Alexander, and I appreciate again you writing this article and kind of laying out this apprenticeship stuff. And I hope that this episode is helpful to people who read the article and check all of your footnotes and get all those references down. And maybe this is a way for them to kind of expand on this article. So I appreciate your time, Alexander. Thanks, and I hope to have you on again soon.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, it was my pleasure.